welcome. Today, very special day for me. I want to present on this gentleman right here. His name is Hen Fetsch. Hen Fetsch is one of the greats of Baltimore and one of the greats of magic. He really is. But you know what? I have a love-hate relationship with my city. I'm living in Baltimore now. I was born in Baltimore. I was born in Memorial Hospital in 1960. I was raised off of Andover Road, which is about 3 blocks from Old Memorial Stadium, which is no longer standing. By the way, people didn't appreciate that Memorial Stadium was torn down. When Camden Yards was built, Memorial Stadium kind of lost its appeal and it gradually fell into disuse. But the point is, there was a memorial on the front of the stadium. That's why they called it Memorial Stadium, and people felt that the memorial should stand. Anyway, I digress. The reason I do that is because Baltimore has an extraordinary. I mean, if and I didn't control this. I was born here. It has an extraordinary magic history. For some reason that I don't understand, magicians, the history of magic in Baltimore have dovetailed beautifully. And Baltimore has produced some magnificent performers, and it's made its mark in magic history that will forever last. I mean, let's face it, Keller passed the wand to Thurston right here in Baltimore. But Hen Fetsch was a Baltimore native. Now you're probably thinking, if you're like most people, you're thinking, Dave, who's Hen Fetsch, right? I mean, if you lived in the 1950s, you would know who Hen Fetsch is. Now I know what you're saying, Dave. Why don't you stick to more contemporary topics? When I tell you what Hen Fetsch did, I think you'll understand how contemporary he actually is. And this book, I'm going to give a little bit of a review to this book. It's called Fetching Magic by Robert Kirkwood Spencer, published by Magico. Let me get you some more details here. I'm going to put the details down below. But Fetching Magic, The Life and Legacy of Hen Fetsch by Robert Kirkwood Spencer, Magico, New York. The year was 2007. It is a wonderful work assembling much, not all, but much of Hen Fetsch material, also providing an excellent biography that I want to talk about in a second. You know what? I don't like dust covers. There was a lovely dust cover with a photograph of Hen on the cover. I ended up getting rid of the dust cover, and I'm sorry. I mean, I've had this book for a while, and I generally don't keep dust covers, so I don't have that to show you, but I wanted to go over the book a little bit. Let me give you the basics of Hen Fetsch. Hen Fetsch invented a trick called Symbologic. Now, let me give you the basics of Symbologic. The performer. You have 5 ESP cards. The spectator has 5 ESP cards. As the performer, you say, I'm going to think of an ESP card. I'm going to lay it face down here. I want you to think of which one it is and lay it face down on top. Go through all five match. What does that sound like? Let me give you a hint. Darren Brown. Okay? Darren Brown's doing this in his act today. It's called Symbologic. It was invented by Hen Fetsch. So, let me give you another one. Magician has a slate divided into 6 sections. Magician writes something, spectator covers it, spectator writes it beneath it. All 3 match. It's called mental epic. If you want to see the what I consider to be the best work on mental epic, you have to take a look at Richard Osterland's work. What was it called? Live Without a Net. I think you have to check the table of contents here, but I think that the video is called Live Without a Net. What he's doing, Osterland did a lot of studio-produced mentalism, and he was criticized for that. people said, oh, that stuff doesn't work in the real world. Well, it does. It absolutely does. So Osterlin wanted to prove that this material worked in the real world. So he got a gig in the real world. And it was videotaped. And they produced a magic instructional or a mentalism instructional out of it. And in that video, Live Without a Net, he does the mental epic. There are lots of innovations of the mental epic. There's a no force mental epic. There's lots of different, and Osterlin himself has several different variations of it, but the mental epic that he does in Live Without a Net is the way that Hen Fetsch invented it. And when you see the handling of Osterlin doing the classic mental epic, you'll probably want to do it. If you're a mentalist, you probably want to do it. It's fantastic. Another thing that Hen Fetsch did, now Bob Carver was the inventor of the Professor's Nightmare, but Hen Fetsch did a lot of work prior to Bob Carver's innovation that I think probably inspired Bob Carver. He did this work called Rope Sessions. It was published in 1954, and he published an effect called Quad Ropelets in 1955 that maybe could have inspired the classic Professor's Nightmare. Hen was born on July 9th, 1912, and he crossed over January 1st, 1961. He was only 48 years old. He lived his entire life in Baltimore, Maryland. In his biography, in this book, the story is told, he had a heart attack in early December 1960. He was, God bless Hen, because he worked full-time at BGE. Let me tell you something. My dad worked full-time at BGE, Baltimore Gas and Electric Company. From the time he got out of college to the time he retired, he gave his life to BGE. Hen Fetsch did the same thing. So, I feel a certain sense of family with Hen. He's German, I'm German. He worked at BGE, my dad worked at BGE. They were probably there at the same time. Well, they might have been. Because my dad started in the 50s and Hen was working there in the 50s. So they could have been, I don't know. But there's so many parallels. I'm going to get into some of these parallels. Hen was a full-time, devoted employee at BGE. Did his magic part-time. He was one of the most prolific inventors, and he was a pioneer of the lecture circuit in his day. So he had an extraordinary career, despite the fact that his full-time devotion was to BGE, and he had a family. So he had all these things going for him, but he had a family history of heart disease. And in December of 1960, he had a heart attack. And the doctors basically told him, you need to slow down. Now, he was working at the time he was going to be doing a column for the New Tops magazine, which, if you haven't seen the New Tops magazine, check it out. You can check it out on one of the library sites. I'm going to try to put the link below. There's a wonderful site that the name eludes me right now, but it has archived all this. You can get all the Genie magazines on this site. You can get all the Mum magazines. You can get all the Tops and New Tops magazines from this site. So he was working on a column for Tops. Doctor told him to take it easy. It was actually New Year's Day. He had another heart attack. He was being taken away in an ambulance. And he told his daughter he loved her from as he was being placed into the ambulance, and that was really the last thing that he said. So Hen passed from this world January 1st, 1961. He was a great friend of Milburn Christopher and Phil Thomas. Now, these names are legend to me. They are important to me. Both of these guys, Milburn Christopher and Phil Thomas, were from Baltimore. They were born and raised in Baltimore. Milburn Christopher went on to become a historian. He wrote a book. I have it over here. He wrote a book on the history of magic which is considered one of the classics, seminal works on the history of magic. He was a television pioneer. In fact, his work on television is said to be the very first primetime magic special in the history of television. And I'll talk about that in a second. That was May 27th, 1957. And Hen Fetsch and Phil Thomas and Milburn Christopher worked on that show together. So these three gentlemen, Hen Fetsch, Milburn Christopher, Phil Thomas, were considered the unholy trio, sometimes called the Little Demons. Now, back in the day, back in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, magicians liked to use titles like Demons Club and Little Demons and stuff like this. These guys, they met in a Boy Scout troop. They were Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts together, and that's when they met. They became best friends. They hitchhiked up to Lancaster to see their first ever magic convention when they were teenagers. So they were a fearsome threesome. If you're familiar with the tarot, you might be familiar with the Three of Cups, and these guys would certainly be the Three of Cups. So they were together all the time. They were charter members of a club called the Pyramid Club. Page 7 in this book goes into some of this club lineage. I wish somebody, and maybe I'm the person to do this, I don't know. There's some great historians in Baltimore, Mark Walker, for example. I would like somebody to do a history of the magic clubs in Baltimore. I think this is fascinating stuff. I really do. The Pyramid Club was the youth wing of a group called the Society of Osiris. Osiris was the Egyptian lord of the underworld, brother husband to Isis. The literal meaning of Osiris is powerful or mighty. The Pyramid Club, which was the adult magic club, wanted to groom youngsters. So they started the Society of Osiris. And back in this day, this was the 1930s, 40s, 50s, in that bracket. Masonry was extremely popular. It still is, but in this day, I just wonder what the parallel. I don't know the answer to this question, but I wonder what the relationship, if any, is between those fraternal organizations, the Masons, and some of these early magic clubs. I remember when I became initiated into the Society of American Magicians. It wasn't just, you want to be a member, fine, you're a member, boom. I mean, it's kind of the way it is today. I had to go through a vote. I had to go through an interview. I had to perform a 15-minute set, and that set had to be evaluated. There was an initiation process. I had to take an oath, which I still honor to this day. And that was in the 70s. So, I mean, you go back to the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and I think initiation was a little more complex. But anyway, let me see if I can show you a photograph that really, it's the reason I decided I wanted to do this presentation. This is on page 9 in the book, and by the way, this photograph is available online. There is a website devoted to magic history in Baltimore, and I'm going to find it. I'm going to put the link below so you can see this image. This is Howard Thurston. Howard Thurston used to come to town every year, and every year the magic clubs would go to see just about every performance that Thurston did. Some of these guys would go backstage and help. But here in this photograph, you have Howard Thurston. Milburn Christopher is, by the way, he's wearing a herringbone suit, very much like the suit that I wear when I perform. So, again, the parallels between these guys and my own feeling, my own sense of magic is just astounding. But you have Milburn Christopher here, very young Milburn Christopher, doing a card trick. Hen Fetsch is back here smiling at the camera. And Phil Thomas is right here looking on. So you got these three guys together with Howard Thurston. Now, what this means to me, these are Baltimore guys here. These are my brothers, you know. These are family to me. And you might say, well, you never knew Hen Fetsch, and you never knew Milburn Christopher. That's true, but I was very close to Phil Thomas. Let me tell you a little bit about Phil Thomas and me. In the late 1960s, early 1970s, my dad started taking me to the Yogi Magic Mart, which was Phil Thomas's magic shop. Went down there every Saturday. He would drop me off. My dad would drop me off when the shop opened on Saturday morning, and he wouldn't pick me up until late at night. I was there all day long, and Phil used to have me run errands for him. I would even take deposits to the bank for him. And so that went on for many, many years. And during those Saturdays, Phil taught me magic. He taught me. So here he is standing here with Hen Fetsch and Milburn Christopher, the unholy trio, with Howard Thurston. Howard Thurston, arguably the greatest magician of the golden age. And here I sat at the feet of Phil Thomas, who sat at the feet of Howard Thurston. Do you see how magic connects? There's a lineage here. There's a heritage that we all share. These degrees of separation, if you will. Once you get involved, and you're going to the shops, and you're going to the clubs, and you're interacting with the performers, there's probably a performer that you admire. I don't know who it is. Could be Dan Sperry, could be Chris Angel, could be Lance Burton, could be David Copperfield. Could be any of the contemporary performers, could be Richard Osterlin. Eventually you're going to have the opportunity to interact with these performers, and their imprint is going to come on you in a very personal way that you're not going to get watching television or YouTube. And that is what I see in this image. And I feel the sense of connection to these people and to the history of magic. And it just moves me. And when I read the book, and particularly the historical section, and saw there are street names given. I know those street names. I've been to those places. I know these people, and it's just a very, very personal thing to me. So the unholy trio: Milburn Christopher, Phil Thomas, Hen Fetsch. Now, Milburn Christopher, as I said, was the historian and the television pioneer. Phil Thomas ran the Yogi Magic Mart. His slogan was the Mecca for magicians, but you know it really was. Back in the 50s, early 60s, even arguably the 70s, it was the magic shop, and it was on Charles Street in Baltimore City. Hen Fetsch was one of the first magicians. And what I mean by that is he was an innovator. He was an inventor. And they say, now I never saw his lecture, but they say that his lecture was legendary, and he really was a pioneer on the lecture circuit. So these three guys that grew up together went on to distinction and to have wonderful careers. Page 36 and 37 in this book, I'm not going to read it. I think that would probably be inappropriate to sit here and read the book to you. But page 36 and 37 talks about the Festival of Magic. And the television show that Milburn Christopher produced and starred in, it was the first primetime network magic special. Now, there's a story in here. Now, again, if you've watched these videos, you know I'm the human resource director for my company. I've been doing that for 26 years. When you're an HR director that long, you know, the rules are part of the air that you breathe, right? I mean, I'm responsible for workers' compensation. I'm responsible for the liabilities of the company. If the company faces a litigation, it comes to my desk first. So here these guys, they decide they want to do the bullet catch. The bullet catch. Now, first of all, if I'd been living back in those days, I'd have said to them, don't do the bullet catch. You know, because even a casual knowledge of the history of the bullet catch, you know that people die doing the bullet catch. So, I mean, and I used to be an NRA decorated sharpshooter. And again, if you've had any formal training with firearms, you don't stand in front of a rifle. You just don't do that. So here they are. They have to practice the bullet catch because they're going to do it for the Festival of Magic. And they decide to do it in the basement of BGE. You know, so they're moving stuff, they're moving equipment out of the way so they can discharge a firearm in the basement of BGE. You know, this is 1957. You know, I had mixed emotions when I read this story. I thought, you know, these guys are out of their minds. And they're young men. You know, they're young men at the time. But it just goes to show you how devoted magicians are. Magicians will do anything. Again, I'm reminded of a film called The Prestige with I think David Bowie's in it. Really a great cast. Scarlett Johansson. Hugh Jackman. So these guys go to extremes for their art, and to me that's an extreme. But they pulled off a wonderful show, and it turned out to be a pioneering effort. I mean, Doug Henning, who ushered in the second golden age, probably owes something to Milburn Christopher for being the first one to make his mark on television, on the national television scene, establishing that magic can be done on television. Of course, Don Allen went on to do a great show. Mark Wilson went on to do a great show on television. So all these people piled on the success wagon once Milburn Christopher broke open that opportunity. So while he was a full-time employee and a devoted father and husband, he invented some of the world's great magic that still holds up today. He partnered later in life with a gentleman named Gene Gordon. This is an interesting story too, by the way, that's related in this book. Gene Gordon, when Hen was young, he and Milburn and Phil went out of their way to go and see Gene perform. And Gene was a hero to them. He was their role model. They looked up to Gene. And later in life, when Gene opened his magic shop, he partnered with Hen Fetsch. They got together. This is one of the things I love about magic is the people that you look up to, that you admire, that inspire you. These people want to be part of your life. In most cases, there's a sense of family in the magic community. We treat each other like family. We see each other as brothers and sisters. We're family here. And to such an extent that Hen Fetsch called Gene Gordon Dad. And Gene Gordon looked upon Hen as a son. And if you want to read something that'll grab your heart, you should read, and it's in this book, Fetching Magic. You should read the letter that Gene Gordon wrote to Hen Fetsch when he learned of Hen's passing in 1961, January 1961. It's just it's one of the most lovely tributes that I've ever read, and it's right here in this book. So pick up the book, folks. Fetching Magic, Robert Kirkwood Spencer. Fantastic. Hey, folks, that was an introduction to Hen Fetsch. Once again, it's not it's not my intention to give you exhaustive material. It's my intention to wet your whistle. So you'll go out, buy the book, read the book, learn about Hen Fetsch, learn about hen's magic, and appreciate this person all over again. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it that you do. Please comment down below. Please subscribe. I'll see you next time. Have a great day.